Welcome back to our study of Solomon's Song of Songs. This one great song, perhaps a dramatic song, made up of many shorter songs. We do know that Solomon wrote many, well over 1,000 songs, but this one is titled his Song of Songs, which might, in one way, mean a song made up of many songs, but if we look at it a different way, the best of all his songs. And certainly we can see why we would think that. As we reapproach our study here, we're starting with verse 5. We're going through verse 8. Now, that may seem like a slow pace, but I guarantee you there will be times when we pick the pace up. For now, we're just trying to cover a specific episode in the song. And that episode is the bride stepping into her new home, the king's palace. And we already talked about how this would be a place where she would go and begin setting up housekeeping. She would begin preparing herself for her wedding with the king. She would not actually be united with the king until after they were married, but it was not unusual in those days for the king to go ahead and bring her into his home and allow her to acclimate herself, to get to know the other women of the household, the servants even, and get to know her way around and begin preparing herself. We talked about how Esther, she prepared herself for a whole year. Now, I don't know if this bride had to do that, but she is starting to move in. And just as she steps inside, she's already addressed the daughters of Jerusalem, but as she steps into the palace, you can see her kind of being surrounded in verse 5 by other women. And these women are kind of staring at her. And she says, "I am dark but lovely." She's feeling a little self-conscious. You see, the women that she's surrounded by were the other wives and concubines of the king. They were residents for a long time of Jerusalem, living in the palace, city girls, as it were, light complected, kind of complacent, kind of sedentary life that they would be living there. They would have stuff to do, but it wasn't the kind of life that this bride was used to living. She talks about why she's dark, why her complexion is so burnt, as it were. And that's because her brothers were angry with her perhaps stepbrothers put her out in the vineyard to do work. This would not have been unusual in those days. Men of the house might have been inclined to take their ease and force the women to do some of the hard labor that we now associate as man's work, but they wouldn't have seen it that way, and they sent her out there. And she says, "I didn't even have a chance to take care of my own vineyard, my own appearance, because I was out there doing the work in the vineyard." And it burnt her skin. She became dark complected. Some people have read verse 5, "Dark am I, yet lovely. I am black, but beautiful." And they've seen in this phrasing the possibility that she was of African origin. And I don't want to completely discount that, but she does seem to be saying that her skin is darker than it should have been because she was out there doing this hard work. And it must have been really dark. She compares herself to the tents of Kedar. Kedar was a nomadic tribe that made their tents out of black goat hair, goat skins, but they were known for being black. So she's seeing herself as much darker complected than she should be. And when she sees herself in stark contrast with the light complected women of the city, she feels kind of self-conscious. And so she feels the need to explain herself. But take note that while she's self-conscious, she doesn't really feel inferior. She says, "Dark am I, yet lovely." She knows her assets. She knows that she's a beautiful woman and that these women are staring at her not just because of her complexion, but because of her natural beauty. And she knows also that the king would have noticed that, and the king had his eye on her. So she steps in and she begins looking around. The palace would have been huge. This particular palace was probably built specifically for the use of the women of the king's household. So she would have been trying to find a place where she could settle in, perhaps a small apartment where she would be able to entertain the king when he came to see her, her own home, as it were, in this large palace. So she's walking around, she's trying to find it. And perhaps even Solomon is with her and introducing her to her new surroundings, and she says, "Tell me who my soul loves, where you pasture your flock. Where can I settle in? Where am I going to be close to you? Where can I get as close to you as I can be?" You see, she's sensing that at this time, over 100 women already call Solomon their husband. Over 100 women. And it would be easy to see how a person could feel like they might get shunted aside. They might get overlooked, misplaced even, as it were. And she's saying, I don't want to be that. I want to be in your heart. I want to be close to you. Where do you pasture your flock? I don't want to be like a person who is veiled, wandering around, looking for my place, looking for where you are, trying to find you by asking your servants, trying to find you by asking your officials. I don't want to be like a stranger in your house. I want to be a person who feels at home. A lot of has been made of the veil that she talks about. Why should I be like a veiled woman? And some people see this as an indication that she would feel like if she was wandering around the house or wandering around the palace trying to find the king, and it was such a big household and so easy to get mislaid, that she might start feeling like people were looking down on her, almost like a prostitute or something, and she's saying, I don't want to be like that. But really, I don't think it's like that. More the way we see women of the East who wear veils today, it's a piece of public clothing. She would have worn it in public, but in the privacy of her home, she wouldn't have worn a veil. She would have taken it off when she was at ease around the people who know her well and people who were allowed to see her without a veil across her face. So she's saying, I don't want to be a stranger in your house. I don't want to be somebody who has to go talk to other strangers just to find out where you are or what you might be doing or how I can get close to you. I want to know where you pasture your flock, and I want to know how to get close. Solomon answers her by saying, if you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock, pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. Basically he's saying, stay close to the center of the household. That is, the people who are part of my family. The other women even, who are his wives and concubines, their families, because the women would have raised their children in this palace. And he's saying, you go ahead and set up your home, you set up your apartments, you move in, but keep it close to the center of the family. Figure out who these people are, which ones are close to me. You go ahead and get close to me too. I want you to be that close to me. So we see this young woman who is a little disoriented, a little confused perhaps, trying to find her footing in a place where she feels out of place, where she feels a contrast, self-conscious, not inferior, and he reassures her that way. O most beautiful of women, he calls her. She knows that she's pretty. She knows that her husband-to-be thinks that she's beautiful. She doesn't have to worry about that. But she does want to make sure that we're not just relying on that. We're relying on an actual relational closeness, a close proximity, being able to find each other when they want each other, being able to get close when they need to. I think these are great lessons for us as married people and even as people who are exploring relationships, to know that while physical beauty and these things are not completely unimportant, we do look at them. It's the first thing that we see when we look at another person. We see their physical attributes, but we all live in a place where there's a certain amount of self-consciousness, where we compare ourselves to other people. Not really a healthy thing to do, but we wind up doing it anyway. I need to be aware as a husband, and you as husbands need to be aware. You wives need to be aware that your spouses, your husbands, all deal with certain amounts of insecurity, certain amounts of contrasting themselves with other people, knowing that some people may seem better than ourselves at times. It's okay to acknowledge that, but it's also a very good idea to reassure each other, to let each other know, you are very beautiful. I do want you I do want you close to me. I want, and to say, I want to be close to you. How do I do that? How do I get closer to you? These are great lessons for us today in this beautiful song, to know that God wants us to express a desire for closeness, to express desire for each other, to express appreciation for the good qualities that the other person has, to make sure that we're communicating those things all the time. It's not like everybody lives on reassurance, but we all do need reassurance from time to time, and it never hurts to give out a compliment. It's always a good thing. Not to be manipulative, not to get your own way in certain cases, but rather just to make sure that the other person knows that you want to be close to them, knows that you desire them. Continue reading, looking ahead. We're going to be moving into another episode of this song where the king and his bride go to a banquet, and we see them interacting, not talking so much about food, but each other. We're going to see the bride settle in a little bit more and anticipate a little bit more the wedding to come. Continue reading and enjoying Song of Solomon.